Let's go. Week 18. Good morning, the DraftKings contributors, Pearce Dietrich, Geoff Ulrich, and Steve Buchanan. Steve, I'd like to start with you. You were here on time. What's your favorite spread this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty, obviously, with the NFL right now, but I have no problem taking the Rams minus 4.5 this week in that matchup. I just think that they should roll over the 49ers. I think this 49ers team, one of the biggest frauds in the NFL, they might have a good record. This team stinks, okay? It's like the Ravens. You're watching the Ravens. You look at their record, you go, how do they have this kind of record? I have no idea. I love the Rams this week. I think they should have no problem covering at home against a 49ers team that is trying to get into the playoffs, but they're also trying to stop a team that's trying to get Cooper Kupp a new NFL record. Give me the Rams minus 4.5. Come on now.
All right, Pearce, go ahead, dude. Your favorite spread.
Well, let's talk about the other fraud that Steve just mentioned, the Ravens. They're not a good team. We just watched the Ravens lose to the Steelers, and somehow the Steelers are getting 6 points. The Steelers are going to win this game. Narratives aside, you can throw out that this is Big Ben's last game, whatever. The Steelers are probably the better team in this matchup. They match up really well. You've got a really good pass rush in the Steelers against an offensive line for the Ravens that's been terrible all season. We talk about all the terrible parts for the Ravens. We don't talk about their line enough. It's a bad offensive line, 26th in adjusted sack rate. Huntley and Lamar have dealt with pressure every single week. They, I think, 19 blitzes against the Ravens in the last matchup, 33% pressure rate against the Ravens dealt by the Steelers. Last week, the Steelers got 9 sacks on Baker Mayfield. That's going to be a big strength for them. And then offensively, Ben matches up well against this team. He understands this scheme. And I know the line has moved because Deontay Johnson isn't going to play. But let's think about this for a second. He targeted Johnson 15 times last week for 31 yards. We're losing 31 yards. Oh, my goodness. That's going to kill us. Actually, it's probably good. This is going to force Ben to throw the ball to Clable, to Ray, to Pat Freiermuth, to Washington, to be more efficient instead of just leaning on Johnson for 31 yards again. I think that this is a steal.
Geoff, did I just hear you giggling?
I mean, it's a pretty impressive stat to get 31 yards on that many targets. It might be a record. I think Ben could have just rushed for 31 yards. Actually, he probably couldn't have. I'm on that game. I'm going to talk about that game a little bit too. But I like, since we're throwing out teams that might be frauds this year, I really don't know why Arizona all of a sudden is 7-point favorites. I think the line may have come down to 6.5 now. It's been fluctuating, but Seattle, I get it. Like, they're not that good a team either. It's still Russell Wilson on the other side. You have to cover 7 points against. We saw what he was doing with DK Metcalf in the last game. He's looked better. Seattle, too, as underdogs over the last 5 years with Pete Carroll, 18-3-1 against the spread. Arizona's also only 2-5 against the spread at home. This is still a team that's really struggled in the passing game without DeAndre Hopkins. Even last week, Kyler was more efficient, but like the big plays weren't there. I don't think Arizona is in any shape to be blowing out teams, let alone one with a quarterback like Russell Wilson. So I really like the +7, even +6.5. I'll take anything over +6 on Seattle this week.
All right, well, let's now go to favorite money line bet then. Pearce, you're up.
We're going to go with the Bengals. So we pulled data from the last 20 years. We look at the AFC North and games with a projected total of 40 or less. So we're not expecting a lot of points. And in those games, the underdog has won 7 of those 8 games. I like that trend. I like the Bengals. I know the Bengals are resting some players, but the Browns are resting some players as well. The Browns didn't see, even the players that they put on the field on Monday night, didn't seem like they were trying that hard. On paper, any way you want to look at it, the Bengals are a better team. Brandon Allen's not a terrible quarterback. He was halfway decent on a really bad team last year. If you look at the Browns, they got 14 players on the injury list. Some of those guys aren't going to play. Some of those guys are going to go out and not even care because it's the last game of the season. The Bengals still have some seeding to play for here. I like the Bengals to win outright, and that's what the trend says is going to happen.
All right, Geoff, who do you like here on the money line?
So we've already talked ad nauseum about the Steelers. I mean, Pearce laid it all out. I think just taking the Steelers on the money line plus 170 is absolutely fine. So I'm going to talk about a different game here with bigger odds too. And I think like you could think about, there's multiple underdogs I think are in play this week. Pearce laid out the Bengals. I think the Bears are in play. What do the Vikings have to play for? I think if anything, this Vikings team will probably be happy if they lose because it's a better chance Mike Zimmer isn't coming back. This defense has absolutely quit on Mike Zimmer. They're not good at guarding against wide receiver position at all. You've got Darnell Mooney, who was targeted 13 times by Andy Dalton last week. I think he's in line for a big game. The offense, I get it. Like, the Bears offense isn't good, but this Vikings team, man, I just don't know what they have to play for. Are they really just going to march Justin Jefferson out there for 20 targets? I don't know. And even if they do, you still have Kirk Cousins back there playing quarterback. So I think a plus 185. The Bears are the team here with more motivation. Andy Dalton probably fighting for a contract next year. I don't know what the Vikings are playing for, except for perhaps the hope that Mike Zimmer won't be back. So I really like the Bears here. I think they're very live at plus 185.
Steve, who are you feeling on the money line, dude?
No, I need to respond. Pierce, when was the last time that trend hit? You said you went back 20 years. When was the last time that trend hit?
I think it was 2012.
2012. Pierce, this is 2022. This is week 18. What does that trend have to do with anything for today, for this week?
It's a decade rule, Steve. It's like you throw something on the ground, 10 seconds. Pierce is going by the decade rule.
He is the oldest man that we have on this show mentally, not physically, mentally. Okay, let's talk about a money line. Who bets money lines anymore? Does anybody bet money lines? I certainly don't, but I'm going to answer the question. The Chargers are going to beat the Raiders, okay? That is probably the most enticing money line on here, minus 160. You can look at that game last week for the Raiders and, they kind of gave the Colts a run for their money. They gave the Colts a run for their money because the Colts cannot play when they're behind, because then they have to rely upon Carson Wentz. And when you have to rely upon Carson Wentz, that's when the team doesn't win. So if you go ahead of the Colts, you're going to cruise in the playoffs here. The Chargers should have no problem against this team, against the Raiders. They can't stop the run. We'll talk about Austin Eckler in a minute here. The Chargers should absolutely run train on this Raiders team. Minus 160 on the money line. Give me that one, Ben.
All right, as for totals, Geoff, what's your favorite Week 18 total here on the DK Sportsbook? There are not a lot of big ones.
No, there's just so many games here where, 41, 37. I mean, you can kind of take your pick about where you want to go. But I'm actually going to go over on, I think it's the biggest total of the week, at least the biggest total on like the main Sunday slate, and that's Seattle, Arizona. I think you're going to see points in this game. I really do. Again, we don't have weather concerns to worry about. You've got a healthy Kyler Murray running the ball. The Seattle defense isn't good. I mean, I know they've picked up their sack rate a little bit, but this is still a secondary that can't guard against anyone. They allowed Cooper Kupp to go nuts against them. I think Christian Kirk, is in a very good spot as well. And then on the other side as well, I mean, you've got two elite wide receivers going up against a team that allows a lot of yardage to wide receivers. And we've seen Kyler and Russ get in these shootout-type games before. Like, they like playing against each other. I think this game has a very good chance to be the one you should be targeting for DFS as well. And I like going over the 48. I think on a regular week, if this was a Week 18, this game easily sees a 50 total.
Okay, Steve, how about you?
Yeah, there's a lot of totals on here. Like, I want nothing to do with totals. Yeah. Like, one of our questions is what game you want to have nothing to do with. It's actually totals. That's what I want to have nothing to do with. With that being said, I do like over 41.5 between Carolina and the Buccaneers. If they're going to give up 24 points to the Jets, that just goes to show how atrocious that Buccaneers secondary is going to be. That is going to be their biggest weakness when it comes to the playoffs. Not the guys that they've lost on offense. It's going to be how they cannot defend against any other team. So if you're allowing the Jets to get 24 points against you, I think the Buccaneers are going to put up points against the Panthers. They got some incentives they need to hit, like with Rob Gronkowski and whatnot, but over 41.5 feels like the play in this one here. It's not going to go, cruising over, but I feel like that one has one of the best chances of hitting the over.
Last time a player tried to hit his incentives there with Tampa Bay, ended up stripping in the end zone and running out and quitting. Anywho, Pierce, total, Week 18.
Bengals Browns over 38 points. We talked about this yesterday, and I did some research over the last 20 years. I don't know what kind of research Steve's doing with talking about running trains, but over 20 years, we've seen 34 and 18 the over. That's it. I'm not the one that said it. Overs have hit 34 of 18 times. So the sportsbook expects, these teams are going to rest their players. But the points end up getting scored in these games because the defenses are resting as well. I believe in Case Keenum. He's been a good quarterback this season.
Are you okay? What's happening? We can only see you. You have to share with the viewers what you were giggling about.
It's not appropriate.
Case Keenum's good. Case Keenum was good with Minnesota. He was good with Denver. He had one bad season in Washington, and we've already thrown this guy away. All he's got to do is not throw 300 interceptions. He's better than Baker Mayfield. Cut to the next person.
We are officially off the rails here. Friday morning is my favorite morning. Speaking of favorite, your favorite player prop, Steven?
Boy. Let's go back to that game of talking about trains with the Chargers and the Raiders. Austin Eckler's rushing prop just seems really low for this game. It's only set at 56.5. This is somebody that he went over 100 yards against earlier this season on just 15 carries at 117 yards against the Raiders. If I like the Chargers to win this game, I most certainly am going to like Austin Eckler to go over his rushing yard prop in this one at 56.5. This is a number that he's going over consistently. Now, you could push back and say that the Chargers are using a little bit more of a committee really since Justin Jackson got into the mix, a little bit of Joshua Kelly. Maybe they want to rest up for the playoffs here, but if he's going to have that type of output that he had earlier in the season against the Raiders, so I got to take a handful of carries for him to go over this 56.5 total. So I like the over on that one.
All right, Pearce, how about you, man? Keep it together.
Yeah, let's forget about trains. Let's talk about Jets. Zach Wilson over 192.5 yards. Zach Wilson over 192.5 yards passing. They're 16-point dogs, which means they're going to see a lot of passing, which means they're going to be down by a lot late. So not only will the Jets have to pass a lot, they might face a soft prevent defense that's going to allow him to go over. He's gone over 190 yards in 7 of 12 games this season. He's gone over 200 yards in 4 of his last 5. He's averaging 34 pass attempts in his last 5 games. It seems like the Jets are doing the smart thing, which they rarely do, and saying, hey, let's see what we have with Zach Wilson. Let's turn him loose. Let's see if he can throw the ball for 192 yards. I know Buffalo is good, but this game sets up pretty well for him to get over this.
Geoff, bring us home here in the player prop department.
Bring us home. Last time this panel will ever be together, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Look, we don't have all the props up for the Steelers game, but I really feel like you've got to take advantage of this Deontay Johnson situation. We know the Steelers are going to pass the ball, and the Ravens secondary is just so bad. I think you got to take the over on Chase Claypool. His receiving yardage prop is up right now. It's 57.5. This is still a player who's just capable of hitting this prop in 2 catches, essentially. And I like targeting Claypool for a touchdown this week as well. Somehow this dude has 1 touchdown on the year. 1. He had 9 last year, and he's got 1. I don't know. I mean, I think you've got to play the Claypool props at least 1 more week for the over. With Johnson out, we've seen him be in high usage roles too. He's had games with like 9, 11 targets before this year when the Steelers have been a little bit shorthanded. He's got to do something against this Baltimore Ravens secondary.